carry the curse of the Wolfen. The broadswords carry something far more embarrassing, a heightened libido. Their discipline barely keeps in check. But that joke hides one of the most remarkable chapters in the Imperium. Founded after the Bardab War, the broadswords are nomadic. No homeworld, only their warships. Their chapter master, Roberto Scorpius, is a former astral claw who defected before his chapter fell, refusing to follow Huron Blackheart into treachery, much like Garviel Loken 10,000 years before him. What he built is the antithesis of everything the astral claws became. The broadswords study and honor other chapters, the compassion of the salamanders, the fire of the white scars, the discipline of the ultramarines. Their line troops fight in Raptor's doctrine, striking from ambush. Their intercessors carry swords alongside their bolt rifles. Scorpius himself is a librarian who has stared into the warp for centuries and emerged kinder. His brothers call him not Lord, not brother. They call him father. And when they win a world, they do not simply leave. They stay, they rebuild, they mourn the dead. In a galaxy that has forgotten mercy, the broadswords remember. The broadswords are a custom chapter, created by Sir Badavir, not official lore. Want your custom chapter featured, or a deep dive into a piece of official 40k lore? It all happens on my Patreon, link in the bio. Did you know there is a Space Marine chapter whose gene seed mutation has made them insatiably attracted to women?
I must attain victory alone and honor my brother's sacrifice.
They are the broadswords. Every chapter has a curse. The Blood Angels burn.
And there, they have been significantly enhanced from baseline human genetics, more enhanced, suggested, than the typical warrior products of the human genetic engineering programs that the Necron databases contain references to. The Plasmancer filed its report with the precision of a species that has been doing this kind of analysis for 60 million years, and then transmitted a request to the Central Command hierarchy. The overlord of this tomb world, it concluded, needed to review this personally. The request was processed, the overlord's awakening sequence was initiated, and the tomb began, very carefully, to wake up. The Discovery Ancient Eyes on an Ancient Machine. The Overlord's emergence from stasis happens in the central throne chamber of the tomb, in a space designed to communicate the appropriate scale of authority. The architecture here is the architecture of a civilization that built for eternity, not because it expected to last forever, but because it built as a statement of intent, as a declaration that this was a civilization worthy of permanence. The ceiling vaults upward beyond comfortable sight, lost in a darkness that is neither threatening nor welcoming, but simply immense. The pillars that support it are carved with glyphs in the Necrontyr script, old enough that even most Necrons would require a moment to parse the archaic grammatical forms. The floor is polished to a mirror finish, still reflecting the faint bioluminescence of the power conduits that run through the walls like veins. The Overlord let us call him by the dynastic honorific that his systems would remember upon activation. Pharaon of the Outer Reaches, Warden of the 17 Gates, Master of the Haymorak Dynasty, though these titles mean nothing yet, to the Canoptech constructs that attend his awakening, comes online with the particular quality of attention that distinguishes a Necron Overlord from lesser members of the hierarchy. The first thing he does, before moving, before speaking, is access the tomb's status report. He absorbs it in the way that Necron cognition works, not as sequential reading, but as a parallel download, the entire accumulated data of the monitoring systems flowing into his awareness simultaneously. He notes the geological record. He notes the stellar drift calculations that tell him how much time has passed. He notes the status of the revivification chambers and the vast numbers of his warriors and courtiers still sleeping within them. He notes the Plasmancer's anomaly report and the flag dataset attached to it. Then he moves. The Overlord moves through the tomb's corridors with the unhurried purpose of something that has all the time in the galaxy, which he essentially does. He carries a staff of light, the mark of his rank, a weapon that focuses and directs destructive energy with precision that surgical instruments in the human medical tradition would envy. His form in necrodermis is the idealized humanoid that all Necron overlords inhabit, neither rushed nor still, neither threatening nor benign, simply present with a quality of focused intention that fills the space around him. He enters the outer vault. He looks at the golden sarcophagus for a long time. The plasmancer, who followed at a respectful distance, is studying him in return. Cryptechs of all types are observers by disposition. They spend so much of their existence in analysis that watching an overlord's behavioral responses to unexpected stimuli has become a kind of habitual second nature. What the plasmancer observes is interesting. The overlord's physical form remains completely still, which is the default state for Necron bodies when no movement is required. But the readings from his cognitive systems show an unusual level of activity. He is processing something complex. The overlord walks around the golden sarcophagus once, slowly, his optical sensors sweeping every surface. He reaches out in Huokam and does not quite touch it. He stops his hand, perhaps 3 centimeters from the aramite surface, holds it there, and then withdraws. He reads the inscriptions on the surface. His grasp of current human language is drawn from the databases uploaded to his systems before the Great Sleep, which means it is 60 million years out of date. The script he sees is not contemporary. But the plasmancer has already run a basic linguistic analysis, and the oldest strata of the inscriptions beneath layers of added honors and campaign records appear to be in a form of Proto-Gothic that dates, as best the linguistic analysis can determine, from approximately the early 31st millennium. The Hammurabi dynasty's databases do not have detailed records of human civilization from the early 31st millennium. The Necrons entered their Great Sleep when the dominant species on Terra was still a pre-technological ape. But the databases do have something, the monitoring programs that certain tomb worlds ran during the approach to the Great Sleep, before the final sealing. Some of those monitoring programs sent back data that was archived before the vaults closed, and that data contains sparse references to the emerging civilization on the third planet of the Sol system, the species that the Necrontyr had vaguely registered as a potential future concern. The Overlord accesses those archived references now. What he finds is fragmentary fragments of sensor data from probes that passed the Sol system during the Unification Wars, during the earliest stages of what was apparently called the Great Crusade. There are references to a faction within that civilization's military hierarchy, described as personal guardian warriors to the civilization's supreme leader, warriors who wore distinctive golden armor and carried weapons that combined close combat and ranged fire capability. Personal guardian warriors, golden armor. He looks at the sarcophagus. The plasmancer watches the Overlord's cognitive systems register, something that is not quite shock, but is closer to it than Necron processing usually gets. The Overlord turns to the plasmancer and asks a question in the machine code that passes between Necron intelligences, a question that does not require translation. How long has this been here? The plasmancer's answer is careful. The geological evidence around the sarcophagus's point of installation suggests that it arrived within the outer vault, approximately between 9 and 11,000 years ago, significantly after the tomb's sealing, which means it was placed here during the period of the Great Sleep. The outer vault in which it was found connects, through a collapsed passage, now repaired by Canoptech work, to a section of the tomb complex that experienced a significant geological event sometime in the early 31st millennium. The passage was open then. Something large could have been moved through it, deliberately or otherwise. The Overlord processes this, 9 to 11,000 years ago. The outer vault, a golden sarcophagus containing enhanced human biological tissue in deep stasis, with power systems still running, with inscriptions in an archaic form of human language, with construction quality that speaks to a level of craftsmanship significantly above what the current human civilization demonstrates. He asks the plasmancer one more question. Does the biological tissue show signs of consciousness? Is there anything in there that is still, in any meaningful sense, aware? The plasmancer's answer is the one that really changes the nature of the situation. The neural activity in the organic component is minimal, consistent with deep stasis rather than active consciousness, but it is present. faint, like a candle flame in a sealed room, burning on the last of the available oxygen. But present. Something in that sarcophagus is still alive. Section 7. A Reckoning Across Millennia. What happens next in the Overlord's decision-making process is something that would take a human psychologist a very long time to map, because Necron cognition does not work the way human cognition does, and the categories do not always translate cleanly. But there is a process, and it runs something like this. First, the Overlord assesses threat level. This is the most immediate and most deeply encoded response in his hierarchy. The survival programming that was written into every Necron at the level of fundamental architecture during the biotransference process. The object in the outer vault has been present in the tomb for approximately 9 to 11,000 years without doing anything threatening. Its power systems, while active, are directed entirely at life support and stasis maintenance. There are no weapons charging cycles detectable in its systems. The organic tissue within it is dormant. By any reasonable threat assessment, this thing is about as dangerous in its current state as a sealed container. The threat level is registered as low. Then comes the analysis of what it actually is. The Overlord knows because the archived pre-sleep monitoring data says so, however fragmentarily, that the human civilization that emerged in the 31st millennium was unusual in the context of younger species. The Necron's general relationship with younger species is one of profound and occasionally contemptuous distance. Most of them are insects. They rise, they burn with their brief furious light, they fall. Their technology is primitive. Their politics are chaos. Their lifespan as a civilization is measured in thousands of years, where Necron dynasties are measured in tens of millions. But the monitoring data from the early 31st millennium showed something slightly less dismissible: a unified human civilization, apparently in the early stages of genuine expansion, apparently guided by a single individual of significant capability. The archive data does not contain detailed analysis. The monitoring probes were not sophisticated systems, and most of their transmissions predated the final tomb sealing by considerable margins. But there is a reference to the Guardian Warriors in particular, with a notation that suggests someone in the pre-sleep administrative hierarchy found them interesting enough to flag. The notation reads, "In the machine code shorthand of Necron administrative documentation, warrior type, enhanced organic, unknown augmentation process, single individual crafting signature suspected." Single individual crafting signature. The implication being that the same person made each of these warriors individually with direct involvement. The Plasmancer, when the Overlord shares this notation, processes it with visible in the subtle behavioral sense that Necron cryptex express visible reactions interest. For a warrior type to be produced through single individual crafting rather than industrial process implies either an extremely limited production volume or an extremely high value placed on each individual unit. Probably both. The Overlord stands in the outer vault and considers the golden sarcophagus with an attention that, in a living being, you might call reverence. Not because he reveres the humans. The concept of reverence for a younger species is not something that maps easily onto a Necron Overlord's emotional landscape, but because the specific details are accumulating into a picture that is genuinely remarkable. This warrior in the golden sarcophagus was made by one specific being, made with that being's direct attention, sufficiently important to that being to warrant individual crafting rather than systematic production. Interred in this extremely rare type of war machine, the Plasmancer has now fully analyzed the Dreadnought chassis and confirmed that the quality of its construction is comparable to the finest work the human civilization is known to. Produce, and at least one component of the chassis shell, reads as having been worked with a psychic presence embedded in the metal during its forging. Psychic imprinting in metal is something the Necrons associate with very specific categories of artificer, the kind who channel reality manipulation into physical objects as a matter of course, the kind, in short, who are not merely craftsmen but something more. The war machine itself is also, the Overlord notes, still armed. The weapons integrated into the chassis are powered down but intact. The Plasmancer's analysis has identified what appear to be energy weapons of some type, and on one of the chassis' arm mounts, a close combat weapon of considerable size that carries the same auramite composition as the sarcophagus's outer casing. Whatever is in there was placed in stasis while still armed, as though whoever did the placing either expected the stasis to be temporary or wanted the occupant to be ready for immediate combat upon awakening. Or perhaps the Overlord considers whoever placed it here did not have the time to disarm it. The geological evidence suggests that the passage by which this thing entered the outer vault collapsed shortly after whatever event brought it here. There was no careful preservation, no deliberate entombment with ceremony. Something happened, something large and catastrophic enough to bring a war machine of this quality through a geological corridor into a sealed Necron tomb world, and leave it there, and then the corridor sealed, and the thing was left behind, or hidden, or trapped. The distinction matters, and the Overlord does not yet have enough information to determine which. He calls the Plasmancer closer. He gives instructions. He wants a full survey of every accessible passage in the outer vault section. He wants the geological record of the collapse event analyzed in detail. He wants every piece of text on the sarcophagus's surface translated. He wants the biological systems within the sarcophagus detected. He does not, for now, want anyone to wake it up. He goes back to his throne chamber and calls a different kind of awakening, not the general revivification of the warrior ranks that can wait. He calls for the specific awakening of his court, his Lich Guard, his senior immortal commanders, and most importantly, a second Cryptek. This one is a chronomancer, a specialist in temporal phenomena and the manipulation of time. If anyone in the tomb has the specialized knowledge to properly analyze what is happening with the stasis systems in that golden sarcophagus, and to potentially understand the timeline of events that brought it here, it is a chronomancer. Because the Overlord has formed a hypothesis, it is tentative, built on very limited data. But if it is correct, then what is in that outer vault is not simply an interesting archaeological specimen from the current era of human civilization. It might be from the beginning of that civilization. It might have been placed there, or trapped there, during an event that predates the current human institutional hierarchy by 10,000 years. It might, in short, be one of the oldest living things in the galaxy that the Necrons have never encountered before. The analytical precision with which a Necron Overlord approaches an unusual situation is genuinely extraordinary when viewed from the outside. The speed and thoroughness of the assessment, the simultaneous processing of energy readings, linguistic analysis, geological data, archival records, and behavioral modeling reflects a cognitive architecture that has been optimized across millions of years for exactly this kind of multivariable assessment. The Hamorak Overlord is not a being making intuitive leaps and then constructing justifications for them afterward. He is a being running comprehensive models in real time and updating those models with each new piece of evidence as it becomes available. This is why the hypothesis he arrives at carries the weight it does when he eventually formulates it clearly enough to present. He has not leapt to a conclusion. He has accumulated evidence until the evidence points firmly in a direction, and then he has stated the direction as a conclusion with the appropriate level of attached uncertainty. The conclusion is this: the being inside the golden sarcophagus is a member of the personal guardian warrior class of the human civilization that was in its early expansion phase when the Necrons last had monitoring data. The specific type of war machine it is housed in represents the highest available expression of that civilization's engineering capability as applied to warrior preservation, and the being who made both the warrior and the machine whose psychic imprint is in the metal, whose singular crafting signature appears in the enhanced biological tissue of the occupant, was the leader of that civilization. The weight of this conclusion sits differently on the Overlord than it might sit on a younger or less self-aware intelligence. Because the Overlord understands what the human civilization is in the 41st millennium, and he understands what it was in the 31st millennium when the monitoring data was last current, and the specific gap between those two pictures tells a story that is, in its own way, as tragic as the Necron's own story. The civilization that the Emperor was building during the Great Crusade, the civilization that his personal guardian warriors were created to serve and protect, was meant to be something. The monitoring data suggests a project of genuine ambition, a unified human civilization spreading across the galaxy, organized around the principle that humanity could be something worth the resources invested in it. The Golden Throne and 10,000 years of decline are the answer to the question of whether that project succeeded. The Overlord has no particular sympathy for the human civilization. The Hammurack dynasty's relationship with the Imperium will be the relationship of a predator to a prey species. In due course, when the dynasty has sufficiently consolidated its post-awakening position to project meaningful military force into the surrounding systems. But there is something in the shape of the story, the leader who made extraordinary things because he believed in the purpose, who ended up sustained by a machine because there was no other option, whose extraordinary things continue to serve in his name while he is effectively absent, that produces, in the Overlord's behavioral matrix, the specific activation pattern that corresponds to resonance. Something about it is familiar. Something about it maps onto a story the Overlord knows from the inside. The Silent King, the Necrons, the Great Sleep taken because there was no better option. The extraordinary things that still carry the purpose forward, even as the being who originated it is no longer fully present in the way that he once was. The comparison is imperfect, and the Overlord would not make it explicitly because it is not analytically rigorous enough for his standards. But in the deep substrate, where the ghost of a Necrontyr person still exists, some thread of recognition runs between the story of the Emperor and the story of the Silent King. Both leaders who sacrificed the full expression of their presence for the sake of what they were building, both absent in their own ways from the civilizations that continue in their name. Section 8. The question of waking it. There is a debate in the Hammurack court about what to do next. This is, in its way, unusual. Necron decision-making does not typically involve extended debate. The hierarchy is clear. The Overlord decides. The subordinates execute. This is how Necron society has functioned since before the Great Sleep, and the tendency of the highest intelligence in a given command structure to make unilateral decisions based on their own assessments is deeply encoded in Necron institutional behavior. But the Overlord has specifically solicited the input of his cryptex, which tells the Lich Guard observing from their positions at the chamber's perimeter that this situation is outside his standard analytical framework. When an Overlord asks for advice rather than simply issuing orders, it means the problem is genuinely complex. The Plasmancer presents its full analysis first. The biological tissue is stable, but deteriorating at a rate that is very slow but non-zero. The stasis field is maintaining the occupant's condition effectively, but the power source, whatever it is, shows readings consistent with a system that has been running for a very long time and is beginning to show the effects of that long operation. It is not failing, but the Plasmancer's projection, based on the rate of degradation it can measure, suggests that the power source has a finite continuation time, and that time, while long in human terms, is not infinite. The safest thing for the occupant of the sarcophagus would be either to supplement or replace the power source, which would require accessing the machine's systems, or to wake the occupant, which would transfer the burden of consciousness from the stasis systems to whatever biological processes the occupant's own enhanced physiology can manage. The Chronomancer presents the temporal analysis. The geological record of the outer vault section has been mapped in detail, and the Chronomancer's assessment is precise. The collapse of the connecting passage occurred approximately 9,240 years ago, with a margin of uncertainty of roughly 50 years in either direction. This date corresponds within the tolerance of the dating method, with the general period known from the monitoring data as the early years of the human civilization's Great Crusade. More specifically, the energy signature of the geological event is consistent with a significant detonation of some kind at or near the collapsed passage. Not a natural event, but something explosive, something violent. The passage did not collapse due to geological shift. It was destroyed. The implication, which the Chronomancer presents with the careful language of acknowledged uncertainty, something or someone either pursued the war machine into the outer vault and then destroyed the passage to prevent its recovery, or the occupant of the war machine destroyed the passage themselves to prevent pursuit. In either case, the event was deliberate, and it left the war machine sealed in the outer vault. in the Necron tomb, cut off from whatever was happening on the surface. The Lychguard captain speaks next, which is itself notable. Lychguard are warriors first, advisors second or third at best. But this one has served the Hammurabi dynasty through multiple campaign cycles in the post-awakening era and has developed the kind of accumulated pragmatic wisdom that sometimes makes warriors more useful in these discussions than the cryptech's analytical precision. The Lychguard captain's contribution is simple. What happens if they do wake it, and it is hostile? This is the question that the Overlord has been sitting with. The answer is not immediately simple. The war machine, if its weapons come online, is a significant threat to the individuals currently in the Outer Vault section. Its close combat capability is formidable. Its ranged weapons could damage Necron constructs significantly. The Lychguard are equipped to handle threats of roughly this category. They are among the most capable individual warriors in the Necron hierarchy. The personal guard of an Overlord being something you want to be genuinely excellent at their job. But the engagement would not be trivial, and the destruction of the sarcophagus would destroy whatever is inside it, which the Overlord has assessed as a net loss given what they might learn from the occupant. More importantly, the Overlord is not certain the occupant would be hostile. This is the subtle part of the analysis, and it is the part where the Overlord's reasoning gets interesting. The human civilization currently active in the galaxy, the one that goes by several names in the Necron databases. Most commonly, the Imperium is a factional, internally divided organization that includes militarist theocrats, machine cult scientists, and multiple varieties of genetically enhanced warriors, all of them defending what they describe as the most important being in their civilization. A leader who has been functionally incapacitated for 10,000 years, and whose continued survival is maintained by a machine called the Golden Throne. The Necron databases are not current. They are working from intercepted communications and battlefield analysis and long-range observation, rather than systematic intelligence gathering. But they are sufficient to paint a broad picture of a civilization in a state of permanent crisis. The being that created the personal guardian warriors, the golden armored makers of this war machine, is that incapacitated leader, has been incapacitated for approximately 10,000 years. The warriors who serve him continue to do so in his absence, defending his physical form and the institution he founded. They are loyal, with a quality of loyalty that the Necrons recognize from their own institutional structure, the loyalty of a being whose entire existence is organized. Approximately the same amount of time as this sarcophagus has been sealed in this outer vault. stasis for 9,000 years. They do not know what the current state of the galaxy is. They do not know what has happened in those 9,000 years. When they wake up, they will be, and the Overlord uses a concept here that does not have a precise Necron equivalent, but maps most closely to the phrase, profoundly disoriented. The question is whether that disorientation will express itself as aggression or as something more manageable. The Plasmancer offers a technical option. It is theoretically possible to partially activate the sarcophagus's external interface systems without waking the occupant. If the war machine was built with any kind of external communication protocol, and given the level of craftsmanship involved, this seems likely, then the cryptex might be able to access the machine's systems, read the archived data within them, and learn significantly more about the occupant before making any decision about full activation.